hope you had an opportunity to enjoy the reception sponsored by the Women's Board out in our courtyard, or see the exhibition, which is just fantastic. We wish to acknowledge that the New Mexico Museum of Art sits on unceded ancestral tableland, specifically Onokoge, now present-day Santa Fe. The exhibit itself was made possible through the support and collaboration of numerous lenders, including many of the artists themselves. And I would like to acknowledge Thomas and Lori Barrow, Bostic and Sullivan, the Center for Creative Photography at the University of Arizona, the George Eastman Museum, Betty Hahn, Joan Lyons, Jerry McMillan, Jonathan Morse, the Edward Shea Studio and Gagosian Gallery, Alex Trout, the University Art Museum of the University of New Mexico, the Visual Studies Workshop, and finally, our colleagues in the Museum of International Folk Art and the Palace of Governor's Photo Archive. We want to thank them all for their generous support. And without further ado, I would like to introduce the curator of the exhibition, Kathy Ware, who is our curator of photography here at the New Mexico Museum of Art. Kate has organized more than 30 exhibitions here, including the exhibition book and website Earth Now, American Photographers of the Environment. She previously served as curator of photographs at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, where she was co-curator and co-author of Dreaming in Black and White, Photography at the Julian Levy Gallery. She also served as curator and author of Elemental Landscapes, photographs by Harry Callahan, and presented shows including Photo Mandalas, The Silver Garden, and The Faceless Figure. Ms. Ware served as assistant curator of the Department of Photographs at the J. Paul Getty Museum during the 1990s, and organized the traveling exhibition, A Practical Dreamer, The Photographs of Man Ray, and the exhibition, Vision in Motion, Photographs of Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, both with accompanying books. She has also worked with the photography collection at the Oakland Museum of California and began her career at the Smithsonian Institution Traveling Exhibition Service in Washington, D.C. She's a frequent juror and reviewer of contemporary photography and has written essays on the art of the 20th and 21st centuries. She's particularly interested in work that pushes the boundaries of the medium, and this exhibition certainly qualifies. Please join me in welcoming Kate Ware.
Hello, fellow boundary pushers. I should probably shorten that intro, but it's kind of fun here. I forget sometimes, so I didn't all those things. Well, it's really wonderful to have you here. The show is very close to my heart, and it's a Friday afternoon, and I wanted to see the show more than anything. That's where I said what I needed to say, so I'm not going to repeat all of that here. But I wanted to talk around the show a little bit and tell you some things. And first, also, as long as we're thanking people, first, thank you very much to Mark and the staff here for supporting this vision. This is a really special project to me, and especially big thanks to our head of collections and registration, Ruth Lenore, who was particularly instrumental, as she always is, but particularly at this time, in pulling this off. It's a little tough to do a load show during a pandemic. But we did it. We did it. We're thrilled. So thank you for being here to share that with us. I also wanted to let you know that we're going to have curator Ann Wilkes Tucker do a keynote address in relation to the show. It will be Friday, November 4th this year, and it will be close to the 50-year anniversary of the publication of her book, The Woman's Eye, which you'll see in the show, and this was one of the early attempts to gather together information about women photographers. And that's an important thread in this exhibition. So I'm really delighted. I don't know what she's going to talk about particularly, but I think that will be something about women photographers. And I found this picture of her taken in 1977, not too long after she did the book, so I thought that would be appropriate. Well, I want to say a little bit about myself. Mark already told you, but this show really brings me full circle in a lot of ways. I started out, my interest in photography was always in the disruptors. So So when I was in Los Angeles, one of my specializations within the department there at the Getty was, we'll call it avant-garde photography of the 20s and 30s, with these two characters. And the one in the middle is Tom Barrow. Some of you know Tom. And one of the things we did with these little books, these little in-focus books and projects, was we convened a small group and had a conversation about that artist. And we always made sure to invite an artist to speak for the artist. So we would do that and edit it down. And so I got to invite Tom. I chose to invite Tom because of his interest in photographs. So I knew about some of what was going on in New Mexico already. This was my way of really reaching out and connecting with that. And I felt very passionate about the work of some of the artists who came here, who were part of the show. And that's part of why I'm here as well, because that's an important part of our collection and something that's just very personally very important to me. So why do shows happen? There's one reason right there. I don't just sit around and do shows that all the shows that I want to do. We have a much broader process than that. But in this case, my interest was very instrumental. And there's a piece by Tom. This is the kind of thing that I was interested in, and the overlap that with Maholi, obviously the photogram. But in terms of this exhibition, which is called Transgressions and Amplifications, this is a great example because he's starting with two cameraless photographs. So you can make a photograph without a camera. Some people have done sun prints, for instance. So you're using the light and some kind of object and the paper that's coated with the light-sensitive material. So he's taking that really basic and very early form of photography and amping it up. So he's got all kinds of different things that he's using to make the photograms, stencils, magazine pages, signs, and just creating this very dense composition, dense both visually and conceptually, because it's hard to know what's going on, especially when he gives you a title like Discrete Multivariate Analysis. And so he was doing these in the 70s. This one from our collection is from 1981, so I did slip it in. But it's very typical of the work that he was doing at the time. And then he goes over it with automotive paint, just to give it a little extra oomph. So one of the things that is going on in the show is looking at what photographs can be. And so I want to talk a little bit about the history of that, and then in the context of the show. What you see here is the inside of one of our cases in the exhibition, and it's got a number of examples of historic photographs. And so you see that they're not necessarily 8 by 10, they're not necessarily brown, or they're not necessarily black and white. They're not necessarily flat. So there's some daguerreotypes and some cabinet cards, a stereograph, and then on the end there is a wonderful little album page in which the woman, lady filmer, has kind of made a collage and painted on the page directly. So that was photography. Photography can be all those things. But it wasn't very well recognized in terms of being an art form, and it had much more application and use as a commercial thing. After Stieglitz came along and was really committed to establishing photography as a fine art. That was something he really took on as a mission. And so you see here a photograph by Edward Steichen, which is a gum bichromate over platinum print. So he's using non-silver processes and not the typical photograph that we came to know in our time. But he's using ink, and so what you can't see in the slide is that it's really this breathtaking color of twilight. And so there's a softness to the picture, a real atmospheric effect, almost a density of atmosphere to it, and then that really lovely blue color. so that it's really emulating the graphic arts as they were known. So charcoal drawings, printmaking, these were established and accepted art forms. And so Stieglitz and Steichen, their idea was to have photography look like those things and kind of slip it in and have it become accepted. So that was their strategy. And then, a little later in the 20th century, along come another group who thought, well, that style of pictorialism, that softness and romanticism, that color, that's all well and good. We've all done that. But what we really think photography is something that's much more about the precision of the camera and this incredible machine and its ability to translate what's in front of it onto film. And you see in these two examples, there's a central subject, and it's pretty minimal other than that. So there's a sharpness to these. They were printing on paper that gave them a lot more sharpness. It was very intentional. For the group F64 that was formed in California in 1942, they were working with working with high contrast paper, and there was this idea that you would preconceive the image, you would pre-visualize it, so that you would take the picture that you meant to have, capture that on a nice large negative, and make a beautiful print of that, and not manipulate the work as the pictorialists had. So part of what I'm interested in just reminding you of is that pendulum swing that happens, and the work in the exhibition that you'll see in the wing is part of that as well. So I talked a little bit about artists were harking back to this tradition of photographic plurality, I guess we could say. People weren't taking photo history classes as they can today. That was much less common. Museums weren't collecting photographs very seriously. They were around and about, but it wasn't, you couldn't necessarily just go anywhere and really see the history of photography laid out for you. So one of the things you'll see in the gallery is that case with the historic pieces, and one of the things you'll see throughout the show are the artists referring to them and playing with some of these models and templates. So here's one example, is a daguerreotype, a small daguerreotype, and you hold that in your hand, and it's a unique object, it can't be reproduced. It's in a well-lined case, and then they're in focus, kind of playing off against that. This is called ambrotype of my great-grandfather. So an ambrotype is a little bit less expensive version of the daguerreotype, but very similar. And so he's showing this ancestor, but the ancestor has crumbled. The portrait is very descriptive, and then he's printing it as a photogravure, which is an ink process, and it's, of course, is much bigger than an ambrotype, and it's matted and framed. So what does it mean? I don't know that I'm the person to answer that. I think each of us has to come to it with our own experiences and ideas, but we see him playing with photo history and making his own object. Another piece here by Tom Farrow with a wonderful stereograph that we were able to borrow from the photo archive at the Palace of the Governors next door. So a stereograph, as you probably know, is a 19th century object, and there are two sides to it. They were photographed slightly differently, with the idea that you would put them in a hole where you would be able to see the scene as three-dimensional. So Tom is making a piece that refers to that, and he's making a maybe not so super scenic view of old Route 66. But the other thing that's going on is that he was in the elevator with his friend Robert Victor at George Eastman House, and they were having a conversation about what was the least photographic color possible. And this is what guys did on their coffee breaks back then, right? At Eastman. So they decided pink. Pink was the least photographic color, and so he did a whole series called Pink Things. And this is one of the central kind of didactic comparisons in the show that's really meant to help people get into this idea of what was happening and what people were reacting to and how they were reacting. So you see on the left, Edward Weston's famous Cabbage Leaf from 1931. So that really falls into that category of the F-64, group F-64 purist photograph, right? We saw some of that a little bit earlier. So it's, he's picked out a cabbage leaf. He spent a lot of time picking out the cabbage leaf. He spent a lot of time arranging it in his studio, lighting it, and really making a picture that brings out its strangeness, but also perhaps some essence of it. And so it's kind of looping over and down, and it's almost an abstract, amorphous, organic object, almost like drapery in some ways, in the way he's picking out those ribs. Well, next to that is a photograph of Betty Hahn from 1972, and she really liked Weston's work, but she wanted to make her own picture. So she took lettuce, she decided to do lettuce instead of cabbage. I don't know why. And so her piece is upright, and it's rooted in the ground, and it's green, it's alive, it's thriving, it's reaching for the sun. And then she goes a step further. Weston's got this cabbage in his ribs. She stitches her photograph. She embroiders on it. You don't have to go see it in person. And so she adds those veins of life in a way, in this really visceral way. And she has also printed it on fabric. So I originally called the show Exploding the Canon, because I thought, gosh, these artists are just really rejecting what came before, blowing it out of the water and doing something completely different. But, and I consulted with Betty quite a lot on this project, and she liked that title. But I felt like maybe they weren't exploding. You know, this is the key example to me, is that it's, you know, there's an acceptance and an admiration and an affection, and then just do it wrong thing. So, hence Transgressions and Amplifications. So you'll see in the show some big panels that say, what's wrong with this picture? And I did check with some of the artists before I slapped their photographs on top of that. Daryl Curran is here, and I just said, gosh, you know, I know this sounds a little insulting, but I wanted to acknowledge people's visceral reaction when it came in, which is like, oh, well, that's a photo, that's a photography don't. And so, you know, so some photography don'ts include sticking an eagle in your finished print, I think we can all agree on that. Again, just looking back, Paul Strand, another modernist and really fabulous printer, but you see this very central subject matter. It's recognizable. It's Mr. Bennett from Vermont, and he's using the film in his camera and his abilities and his light to really bring out all this tremendous detail of the wood and make this analogous relationship with the man's weathered face, and make something sort of suggest a sense of the value of work and the poignancy of this man's life. And it's basically 8 by 10. And then there's this. And now there's something completely different. So here's a photograph. What we say by Daryl Curran, he has informed me that you actually did not take this picture because he is the man with the mustache in the picture. But you do still have a central subject, but it's just a completely different picture, right? It's blue. The whole foreground is blown out by the flash. It's not a single negative. It's been clipped and recomposed. And one other photography note. Yeah, he didn't take it. So that's a big photography note. Do you agree on that? So I'm just really interested in these transgressions, but they're playful and loving and adventurous, and I try to avoid the word experimental because that sounds like something's going to blow up. And by the time they signed it and put it on the wall, it's not an experiment anymore. This is a finished product that is the result of perhaps experimentation. Another local artist in the show, Alex Crow, who came here in the mid-70s to really concentrate on his art making, and he's writing on the photograph. And some of you also know the work of Dwayne Michaels. Dwayne Michaels also wrote around the same time. They were writing on the photographs, so that's a bit of mixed media and a bit of transgression. And I'm always really interested in what is it that makes the artist want more. So there's the photograph and. So what is it that the and is contributing? What is it that the photograph is contributing? So obviously in the case of a narrative text, that's a more obvious reason to, it's another way of storytelling that amplifies the picture. So I don't think I need this here now, but I just put that there to just remind you of that pendulum swing. So for those of you who really, like the classic black and white photograph, that's still really valued, and a lot of people are doing that. But it's just from the art historical perspective, there can be that give and take and that, action and reaction. So we talked about a little bit of my personal input into this. We talked a little bit about the art historical context, and now just a little bit of social context. Those of you who may have been around in the 60s and 70s, there were a few things going on. And when we learned about them by photographs, we learned about them on television. And so it was a time of a lot of social upheaval, a lot of different fronts. So I just wanted to remind people of that and just then say that this art was being made in that context. And so how do you find a vocabulary for those things? That's kind of an interesting problem. Well, during between World War I and World War II, artists in Europe were kind of groping to find a way to talk about how chaotic society felt. And so I just wanted to bring that into the mix. And there's a big collage piece by John Hook and John Hartfield used this kind of, adding photographs to another, or, joining photographs together to make some really pointed social criticism. So arguably, we could say some of the artists of the 60s and 70s were also feeling a sense of fragmentation and reaching for that kind of vocabulary to suggest that things were not so coherent and seamless and bright and shiny. But the other thing that was going on was new technologies. And I just put these ads here to remind you of a couple. There are people in the show who have made their work using a Verifax machine and also early non-automated Xerox. And a lot of these folks were gathered together up in Rochester, where both of these companies were based, and so they have access to that emerging technology. And as with Polaroid, which came along later, companies love to have artists tooling around with their equipment and no, maybe not that, but they love to see what people would do with the copying machine and what was possible with it, and to push the limits of their technology so they can learn, even though it was really made for people like that very happy woman who's about to get a bunch of black powder on her next dress. And here's an example of Rochester artist and photographer Jim Lyons worked quite extensively with this Hallway Xerox transfer process, which is this non-automated part. And a lot of these folks were doing complicated things to make their pictures, so we really appreciate them getting their hands dirty. And she's making, again, there's a portrait. You can see it's a picture of her husband Nathan, but it's got these different vignettes. And so it's not just a one single we can encapsulate him in one picture. You all probably remember Robert Rauschenberg and the emergence of serigraph and printmaking during this time, and that was very influential important to these artists. For one reason, here again, you see the sort of fragmentation of the image to create an overall picture, and the introduction of color. And so that was one of the attractions of some of the non-silver processes and printmaking, was that it was easier to bring in color and it was easier to increase the scale of the work. And then a well-known name from the time, Andy Warhol. He loved the Polaroid SX70 camera. You've probably seen his little snapshots of celebrities. He took them obsessively and often would make them into other kinds of works of art, in particularly as prints, Marilyn Monroe, and this one of Nick Jagger. So this isn't a photograph, but the photograph was central to the making of this and an important part of the expression. And here's an example of somebody who really took some of those tools to the limit. Robert Fichter. This is a large picture that stands on the wall very well next to that large Mick Jagger print. And he's using more photographic processes, non-silver photographic processes, but making them big, making them in color, and making social commentary. And it's a little hard to see, but on top, you've got some plastic astronauts, and below are some army men, and some of his commentaries oblique, but it was very consistent, and so that was another really important aspect of this time. It was in the midst of all that social foment. People were commenting on their own participation and what life was like during that time. I wanted to show you something by Joyce Davis. Here's a beautiful picture with a Polaroid stuck to it, and much of her work in this exhibition is about kind of addressing women's sexuality, not in an overt way, but she would use some film stills and she put text from the Kinsey report, which had come out in paperback, on there. And so just, it wasn't a subject that was acceptable for art at the time. Maybe still isn't, who knows. But she was bringing that voice forward and doing some really groundbreaking work. So keep an eye out for those. This was a little more flirtatious than anything. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, we talked about Verifax and Xerox, and then this new Polaroid technology coming in. Another thing that was happening was bringing in other art mediums, we'll say. We saw printmaking for sure, there's paint as well, but also making these three-dimensional and drawing on crafts traditions. So this is another wonderful piece by Betty Kahn in our collection called Soft, well, it's untitled, but they're soft daguerreotypes. So you saw the picture of the daguerreotype earlier in the show, and daguerreotypes are not soft. They're glass, they're metal, they're in a hard case, they're pretty durable. So she's referring back to that, but she decided to make them out of fabric. They're like little pillows. So there's this wonderful velvet that emulates the lining. There's this wonderful shiny gold fabric that emulates the brass mat, and then there's the silver of the polished image, and some rickrack, I believe. And then she's taken a picture not of some august ancestor, but of weeds. So it's a little transgressive and a little amplification-y. So again, very playful, but very serious in terms of connecting with that history and making it her own. Another artist who is well known for stitching on his images is Keith Smith, who's quite famous as a bookmaker. You'll see some of his books in the show. Super creative, prolific man, and I just love this image that's in a book that he made for its simplicity, but its elegance of communication. So he's made a photogram, a camera-less photograph of his head. So it's a silhouette, essentially, on photo paper. And I don't know how well you can see it. Yeah, I think that's pretty visible. So he's then stitched on the inside of it. Well, one of the things that's going on with this group is they're shifting away from more descriptive and more documentary subject matter into more internal, onto more internal subjects, we'll say. So how would you express, a bad singles night? Or how would you express, the tension of thoughts? And that's what I think he's doing here. I think it's just a really elegant, wonderful piece with simple materials. So also, the photograph does not have to be flat. We know that from looking at the historic case. So here is Robert Heineken making a three-dimensional piece on photo linen, and he's put these different shapes into a little puzzle, a little three-dimensional puzzle. Now, we are not allowed to move these around, but that idea is there, it's implied, and he was very interested in representation and how photographs were interpreted. He did not often take his own pictures. I'm not sure about it in this case, but he did appropriate a lot of images. Here he's put this together, and again, the puzzle is kind of playful, but it's also very cryptic. And what else was I going to say about that? Yeah, it doesn't have to be flat, it doesn't have to be of something. It's more complicated than that, and you have to figure it out. And continuing with the idea of the more subjective subject matter, this is a piece by Jonathan Morse, who lives here in town, and he studied at the Visual Studies Workshop in Rochester, and ended up being really interested in lithography. But he started out with photographs, and so you see a photograph of his head and his hands, and some little hints of him, some artifacts of him, but also this sense of being on the beach, and keep seeing these hearts. And so I think he's evoking a sense of a wonderful day and perhaps being in love. And so that's part of expanding the vocabulary and expanding the subject matter of photography, is how to take a picture not of a house or a tree, but of an experience, or of how we remember something, or how we think, which is generally not in a big single picture, but in little pieces that we knit together to make an image in our heads. Another important photographer of the time was Bea Nettles, also very well known for her books that she made. And here she's made a very big picture, so again, kind of breaking out of that 8x10 tradition. She's using a snapshot of herself. Ooh, that seems kind of cheeky. And it is a little bit lovely and romantic, and it is personal. So the idea that art had to be about a great subject or a great event or something very, very serious is out the window. And she's reminding us of herself, or reminding herself of herself as a little girl, and putting herself in this beautiful background. So that she's wearing a fancy dress and just kind of glancing at us. And that was not normally, I think there was really a lot of struggle to get this kind of subject matter accepted, which doesn't seem as odd to us today, but it was not cool. So just a couple more images to close. This is a later piece by Kathy Vargas from the 90s. So what happened after the 70s was that mixed media photography and quote-unquote alternative process photography became pretty commonplace, and there were a lot more schools teaching photography, and this was very much an acceptable approach. Many of the people in the show were teachers and promulgated their approach to things. But I also wanted to say, too, that there was more room for a greater variety of people in the art school. So the core part of the show tends to be more white artists. And then later, I just wanted to acknowledge that there was a lot more variety, a lot more voices. And so that's a little bit of a coda there, but that highlights just to explain what was going on with that. And then finally, I just wanted to say I dedicated the show to Jerry Eaglesman. And some of you will know his work. Jerry died this year, and he was certainly a photo instructor, a very important photo instructor, and a colleague of many of the people on the show. And his work isn't in the show. I really struggled with that because he really worked in the darkroom with gelatin silver prints and just took that to the limit. But it wasn't mixed media, so I had it done with him. But to Jerry, we appreciate everything that he did to show us a new way, and just what a lovely, funny, nice guy, and he will be missed. And then what happened next was digital. So everybody was around for that, right? And so some of the artists in the show really embraced that because it was, the tools were so sophisticated and it really allowed people to do some of the same things much more easily, certainly less nastily. And then other people did not like that, did not want to sit in front of a computer all day, and really turned back more aggressively to the non-silver processes and the wet process and the making it by hand and the one-time prints. So both of those things carry on today, and I would say I consider the digital work not to be photography, but as a separate medium, I would argue. And so I'm still waiting to see what people can do with that's special, that really distinguishes it. Not a lot of people work that way as they consider themselves photographers when they're working in that tradition. So that is what I wanted to talk to you about. I really want to thank the artists. There are a couple of them are here tonight, a couple of them were here last night, and they have been really generous with me and helping me along on this journey. And as I rename their show and try to write out their work in some definitive way where they can look over my shoulder and see what's wrong. So thank you all so much for being here. I hope you'll get a chance to spend some time with the exhibition as well as the other shows that are up. And good night.